Matt James speaks out, and Rachel Lindsay says he was uncomfortable with the episode featuring his father. Hey guys, welcome back to another shared news from home. Rachel Lindsay revealed how Matt James really feels about this week's episode. We're going to break it all down, but before we get started, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future updates. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring, and I'm joined by the incredible Gianna Gravelisi. Gianna, we are so close to the end of Matt's season, and it has been a roller coaster on camera, off camera, and during Fantasy Suites week, that was no exception. Matt had a very emotional sit down with his father. They had, a difficult conversation about their relationship. He was trying to get some closure and some clarity, leading into making a decision, getting engaged that will affect his entire life in theory. It was very powerful, but it was an incredibly personal moment. And a lot of fans spoke out on Twitter about how it felt like it should have been a private moment. Perhaps they could have, at the very least, edited it way down to only really keep the parts that were super relevant to Matt's journey so that they could have worked some of this out in private. So I'm just curious, how did you feel watching this? How did it sit with you as it was airing?
Fiona, I actually texted my friend and said, "This is making me very uncomfortable." And not for the content of the conversation. That's not what was giving me that feeling. I was thinking, Am I supposed to be hearing this conversation? Like, are millions of people supposed to be hearing this conversation? It was just so deep and personal. And I was surprised, as you said, they didn't edit more out. Or I also thought to myself, did Matt want this conversation to actually air after they stopped rolling? Did he think maybe that went a lot deeper than I thought it would go? And like, I don't really want it to air. Or did the producers have the intentions of, ooh, like, this is going to bring up ratings, ratings, ratings with the ignorance of not really thinking, the deeper meaning behind the conversation that was had? So I was just all over the place, but I knew that something was wrong, of course.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that, there is something to be said about parts of that conversation were, of course, very pertinent to his journey, right? He ended up discussing it with all of the women. This was something he felt he needed to do to be engaged. So the lens of which, like bringing his dad in, making his dad a part of the show, fine. I'm totally with that. But I think that there could have been some grace offered in, wow, that went to a place that was personal, private, between family, unpacked some things that, honestly, one of the other things that stood out to me is it looked like his dad wasn't fully expecting the conversation to go in that direction. So I think some, the word I keep coming back to is grace could have been offered in the editing room of, okay, that was a family moment and this is a moment for our show. And clearly it wasn't handled that way. Matt did take to his social media. This is the second statement he's released this season. And he said, quote, "Tonight's convo with my dad was hard to experience, and it's just as hard to watch all this time later." He added, "Too often we see dangerous stereotypes and negative depictions of Black fathers in media, and they have consequences when presented without context. All I hope is that people watch that conversation with nuanced care and also an understanding that there are real systemic issues at play." He explained he's proud that he was vulnerable, proud of his mother. He wouldn't be who he is without his father. With all of that being said, I think he made it clear to fans that this isn't sitting with him as well as he had hoped it would. In his Twitter thread, he also shared a resource from a social justice education lab, the Opportunity Agenda, and a piece titled "Media Portrayals and Black Male Outcomes," which if you click on that link, it explores, the connection between representations of Black men in media and public bias. What stands out to me here is when we went into this conversation with Matt's father, I didn't know anything about their relationship, right? As a viewer, I knew his parents were separated. I knew he didn't have a great relationship with his dad. And I knew that basically they weren't close and that maybe there were some fallout from that divorce that affected him. But why? How? how absent, how what actually happened that led to the divorce, what growing up in Matt's home looks like. None of that was presented to us through Matt's telling of the story or through, an artful montage in the beginning when we kind of were introduced to Matt's world, right? We didn't know. So I think that could be, and I'm obviously, this is me speculating here, but I think that could be some of what he wanted to clear up. Was this conversation was at the very least not presented through the lens it should have been. What do you take from this statement?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, we only knew that Matt grew up mainly with his mother, and we didn't know anything else past that. So now, at the end of the season, for us to hear this conversation that unloaded everything, or from what we know, God only knows what happened in the editing room, it's it's confusing and it's not really fair because it kind of perpetuates a stigma around Black families. There are those ignorant viewers that are going to hear this conversation and think, oh, well, that's just verifying the stereotype I had in my head. As an audience member of, watching this, not knowing anything that happened or the details, it's not really fair to portray Matt and his father in this way right off the bat. I'm thinking, maybe they could have done this earlier in the franchise. So maybe we knew what was going to happen at the end of the season. So I'm not sure if that was really a conversation that needed to be had. I'm hoping, and I know that Matt's definitely hoping that viewers can learn from this conversation. He tweeted that resource. So maybe this is going to prompt people to think based off of that conversation and what it means not only to The Bachelor, but in anyone's life.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I think that, as someone who was watching this, like you said, I felt like, oh my God, like, this is a private moment. Like I shouldn't be a part of this moment. This is private. But it was a very powerful conversation. There's no denying that. So there is something to be said about if Bachelor, if the franchise wants to step into airing these powerful, important, conversations that are going to step in through the lens of, well, this is potentially a stereotype, or this, or this is that, they need to do it correctly, right? Like, there is something to be said about using the show to put a difficult conversation between father and son, air some grievances, but educate people in the process. Do it through the right lens. Don't just edit it like you edit reality TV for the most dramatic effect. That doesn't serve anybody. So it feels kind of like another missed opportunity here to either support and protect their contestant, right? And not air in its entirety, or, it felt like we got a lot of it, right? A very private conversation. Just take the part you need and don't go for the big gasp, right? Or if you're going to go for, we're going to air all of this out and put it out there and make people think, then you better make people think through the right lens and not just in the, oh my God, this feels really private and personal. And maybe like it's not for me to watch, for me to judge. So just kind of another moment, another stepping stone lesson to be learned as they keep moving forward on this journey. Rachel Lindsay has weighed in following the episode, and she, as usual, had some very important things to say. She said on the Bachelor Party podcast, I know for a fact Matt was uncomfortable with this conversation and the fact that it was going to air. So I think that kind of, to your point, Gianna, gives us the clear picture of maybe after that conversation happened, it didn't feel made for TV in Matt's eyes. She went on to explain the scene between Matt and his father was one that should have never aired for American TV on a franchise that she added is not equipped to have conversations about Black absentee fathers. She said, quote, if you know anything about stereotypes that are assigned to particular races, here, the Black race, you know that absentee fathers is a stereotype. She continued explaining, we don't know much about Matt, but what we do know is that he fits into one of these stereotypes that we have for Black people, people who assume certain things of the Black family. She concluded saying this conversation may have been necessary for Matt, but this was a conversation that should have just been for Matt, not for the rest of the world to see. And it shows that you don't care about your contestants, specifically the ones of color, the fact that you were so willing to throw him under the bus and exploit him and stereotypes within the Black community for what you would call good TV. So I have to say, no one puts it clearer, more straight to the point than Rachel Lindsay. And once again, I just feel like I'm left saying, yep, she's right. Like, why don't they just get this girl on retainer so they can stop making these mistakes? They feel so obvious. Like, why can't we just get it right?
Fiona, I totally agree with you. I was thinking the same thing. Answering the question earlier, it's hard finding the words as to why they did it as a viewer. And then Rachel Lindsay just lays out the land perfectly. It's did they truly throw him under the bus by putting that conversation on national television? Pretty much. I mean, I don't know if Matt had the intentions of that conversation being as deep as it was. And, the producers in that room probably thought, well, this is great. This is going to be great for ratings. This is going to get the views up there. They weren't thinking about anything else other than that in Matt's safety. So, Rachel Lindsay, of course, she's a queen. I would love to see her as a producer, host, something, just queen of the Bachelor franchise going forward so that we don't have any more mistakes.
Yeah, I'm with you. And of course, this brings us back to the point we've been discussing. I feel like on a loop, like a broken record for some time now, that we just need to make changes. And I think that this really brings to light again the need for changes to happen behind the scenes. One of the biggest calls to action from fans and past contestants on the show alike is that the decision makers, right? The people who are pulling the strings, people behind the scenes, they need to either be completely shaken up, restructured, at the very least educated, right? And Rachel really brought this point home. She said, quote, "Who greenlit this is the question. If you have diversity consultants affiliated that you keep telling us over and over about, even after I praise the fact that you had them, why are these things still happening?" If the Bachelor franchise has shown us anything, it's that they don't know how to protect people of color. They only know how to exploit them. They only know how to mishandle situations when they come to race. And that's what they've shown us time and time again. So, this is a really good point here. They claim to have hired diversity consultants, right? So, clearly, steps that have been taken, attempts that have been made, either the advice is not being heeded or they just have not made sweeping enough changes. And I'm starting to feel like, and I don't know, maybe I'm just coming at this through a nervous lens, but if we don't really meet the moment and meet it fast, their time is going to run out, right? I'm a fan of this show. I love to watch people fall in love a good moment of drama, want it to succeed. But fans are now feeling like every time there's a new opportunity, the mark is missed. And at a certain point, we're going to run out of chances, right?
Fiona, it's all fun and games till someone gets hurt. We all know that phrase, and people are now getting hurt. Where where is the line crossed? I feel like we've crossed it multiple times and way too far. We need people of color as producers. We need people of color in that editing room. We need people that have lived these awful experiences and are educated enough to help the producers now to not make mistakes. We need these people to lead the franchise in the right direction. If we just, have the same people producing, editing on the backside of the camera, saying that they're trying and they're learning, and we just see no progress, clearly we need like a whole new sweep of people. And those people need to be BIPOC. And that's the only way that things are going to get resolved for the franchise going forward. So if these experiences weren't enough for the producers to have learned from their mistakes, then we need new ones.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I have to say, I'm holding out faith. I have a lot of hope. I think there's a lot of genuine, don't get me wrong, I think the people behind the scenes genuinely would like to make this show the best version it can be. I think, they don't want to be constantly swimming in this narrative of mistakes. Obviously, everyone is looking for progress. And hopefully, let's just get there. Let's make some progress. I think that it is possible. We have a new Bachelorette season coming up. They've said that they're going to be able to tape escape paradise, even within the pandemic. So we have a lot of opportunities on the horizon for them to meet the moment, meet it successfully, and set a new standard for the franchise. And I want to look through the glass half full lens and say that they're going to do that. We're going to get there. On that note, you guys, as we wait for these changes, to come into play and see what happens next, we want to know your thoughts on this conversation between Matt and his father, how the show handled it, and of course, the statement Matt put out on social media. So let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so we updated on all things Bachelor Nation. As always, I'm your host, Fiona. I was joined by the lovely Gianna. If you want to come say hi, our social handles are on the screen right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.